Welcome back. It's great to be here. It's Tzvi Broker with Rabbi Yehoshua Gerzi and continuing our important conversations about work and Parnassa. And the last few episodes, we've been focusing on how we can make that shift, that reframe from just having to be at work, something we have to do, to being something that we're excited to do, something we can enjoy, and how to reframe work from being something which is just, be careful, make sure you don't steal, make sure you're honest, and so recognizing that work is an opportunity for dveikus. Work is an opportunity for connecting with HaKadosh Baruch Hu and energizing ourselves. But the truth is that sometimes you have people that they love their jobs, and sometimes there are people they really enjoy their work, but they have the opposite problem. Or what's that problem? Is that you have people that they find that they're just working too much. Right? How many people do we speak to? And I know for myself also, I'm included. We can find ourselves sometimes overworking. And what we want to talk about here today is how could we avoid overworking? How could we set ourselves a healthy lifestyle to make sure that we're not working too much?
Beautiful. Mama's beautiful. I enjoy the fact that, so many times we hear people don't like their work, but I don't know if you get this. I actually speak to a lot of people where they love their work. And there's some people, we have a person in the base of Medrash. He is right now, it's just interesting. I'm sure we'll have to follow this. We'll have to speak about this. But he's been working in one job and he's enjoyed his job. And everyone says, one job. There's a saying, become a master at one discipline, one job. But he actually now, because he wasn't making enough in his one job, he does 3 different jobs.
3.
And he loves it. And I got him to admit that he would actually rather be working in his 3 jobs and sometimes coming home to his wife. His wife, he doesn't mind, the kids. It's noisy. And I think it's a very, very fundamental question of balance. It's a fundamental question of balance and making sure that we're living life where we put emphasis on what is important. And I think if we go maybe a little bit further back, the background, there's an assumption in regards to people who overwork because they feel they need to make more money, or overwork because they enjoy what they do. But what is this overwork? This overwork I would define, first of all, as the other important priorities in life that you hold as priorities falling away. That's what, do you get that, first of all, that balance? That there's priorities, and I'm not placing the proper, just defining terms, I'm not placing the proper attention on that which is important. Does that make sense, first of all? So you could do that because you enjoy work so much, or a person could do it because they don't enjoy work so much.
Right, but somehow the other priorities are
fall away. So what I would start off by saying is I think there's an old paradigm. The old paradigm, which now is shifting, is that if I work more, I will make more money. Yeah, that if I work more, I will make more money. I'll be more productive. Now, this may seem pretty logical and rational, but the truth is, we look out in the world, and I've got, it's over there, I've got a book which is called The 4-Day Week. And what this person speaks about is if you know to organize yourself properly, you could work for 4 days
instead of 5,
and instead of like 5 or 6 or 7, yeah, and you can then hit this model of work, spend time doing the things that you want to do. So for him, for example, he works 3 or 4 days, and for him, priority is being with his wife and his kids, and he loves surfing. So what happens is that there's this model where, yes, we can have either an old paradigm and we don't enjoy work, but we have this mindset where, no, I have to work to make money, or I enjoy what I do and I'm so invested, but what happens is balance is everything else that seems to be important, that's deemed to be important, falls away. Wife, kids, Torah, learning, etc., etc. And the Torah was very sensitive to this. The Torah is a work of art. HaKadosh Baruch Hu mamash gave us something so sophisticated, where if we look in the workplace, and you tell me what I just said now, this idea of the more I work, the more productivity, is actually an equation that's not so logical today.
Right.
And
Right. It sounds like companies.
You know,
I know that I've been. Companies are really questioning this. In terms, especially we see post-COVID. Where there was this, big shift that happened, where there was always an assumption that a person comes to the office, is where he's going to be most productive. They clock in at this time, leave at that time, and because of what happened, because of COVID, where suddenly people were forced to work in different environments. I think what happened both from the sides of the managers and from the companies really re-questioning and saying, well, how can people be most productive? And from the employee side, people realizing, hey, actually, maybe this wasn't the most productive way for me to be able to use my time.
We just now went through a couple of years where all of our psychological frameworks of thinking towards work have completely changed.
Right.
I have somebody in London who has a business, and he basically has, I think, 11 workers. And basically what happened is that everyone's working at home, but 3 of his workers are cousins. And they ended up meeting, they live close to each other, and they were working together throughout the day. They work online, and they were challenging. They made it fun. They made an office, and they were so productive. But more than that, they asked the boss, if we get done what needs to get done, can we take the rest of the day off? So usually it's like 9 to 5. But this whole 9 to 5 model as well is a little bit, it's changing, because it's more about productivity. I have jobs to do, get the jobs done, and take the rest of the day off.
Right.
And this is a model that sometimes shows even greater productivity. So work is not like 9 to 5. Work is something I need to get done, and then I can go do the things that I want to do. And sometimes people don't even think that's a choice,
right,
and they lose that balance. They lose that rhythm.
It sounds like what's going on, subconsciously in the minds of the person who overworks, whether it's the manager that's having people overwork, or it's the person themselves who buys into that, or someone has their own business and they overwork. Is that there's some subconscious equation that more work, more time on work is going to equal more productivity and more money.
That's just not true.
And what we're seeing is that that's not something which is necessarily true.
It's not necessarily true.
It's fascinating.
In Facebook, in Google, they have let people nap.
Yeah,
let
some
people
wild
nap.
stuff.
Let people have a sleep. Let them finish their work and go chill.
Right.
It's like if you've got a problem, you need to solve a problem. Put your head down, have a rest.
Wow.
There is this.
It's an awakening to realizing that working more may not necessarily actually lead to more productivity.
Correct.
What about from the Torah perspective? You mentioned before, about that. The Torah always recognized, obviously, Hashem understands human psychology and how things work.
One thing I notice, I've been studying the workplace and work psychology. I've been studying gamification, and for it's like 19 years now. 19 years, 19, 18, 19. I love it. I'm in awe of what's going on in the world of psychology. And I reflect, you should know something, that my journey didn't come and begin as, Torah has the answers. I was interested in it. I loved it. I love knowledge. I want to be like the Baal Shem Tov. I want to be like Rabbi Nachman. I want to be like Hashem and know everything. Bang, all in one go. Just want to know everything. And I love, especially the Arba Yesodot, physical, financial health, all of these areas I've been studying in depth for a long time. So it wasn't that, look at this, the Torah says this. And it was this natural consequence that I just kept on coming up to. I would learn something, and then a lot of the time, I would say 80% of the time, see this sort of wisdom and this sort of consciousness in Sugiyas and Shas. So, Lemashal, you can look at Rambams, and for the last 1,000 years, we couldn't live necessarily a Rambam that says, yeah, work a few hours a day and then learn, involve yourself in spiritual pursuits the rest of the time. Who could have imagined that Rambam being a reality? How many people actually look at that Rambam and say, oh, wow, I wish 9 to 5.
Right.
But the fact is, there is a mahalach in the Torah which can very easily be reflected today. Yes, you can work 3 hours a day and you can make a heck of a lot of money. You can work online. There's so much that you can do. You can get your job done in a few hours a day, like the Rambam says, and then spend the rest of the time doing that which you deem as important for you, priority in your life. You've got the other side of the coin as well, where Chachamim, Tanaim, Amoraim, they worked very, very hard, and they had full-time jobs. So in Torah has both models. Torah has a model of working a typical hourly day rate. So you have your hours and you get paid for your hours, and you have certain people throughout the generations, they worked a little bit and bang, they got everything that they needed. So you have these two models, and I think that's very... You have to look as well at the personalities, who want the 9 to 5. So you look at millennials, for example. Within the last 50, 60 years, people, job security, and you have to have 9 to 5, and for them, their mindset, wives, family, that 9 to 5. But then you've got other people that model is not good for them.
Right.
So you do see both models in Torah, and Torah treats both as something incredibly real, and Torah does not mock different models of how people can express themselves in learning. Torah does warn us, though, make sure you live the life that you need and want to live. Make sure you care for your family. Make sure you care for the children. Make sure you care for your community spiritual needs. So
yeah, it's interesting because I know when I was doing my own journey in terms of understanding the sugya of what types of jobs and professions, somebody who's working with people and helping people choose a career path and jobs. So it fascinated me to be able to see the different jobs, like what were those jobs and what were those professions that we find, from the Gemara, the different Tanaim and Amoraim, and you're going through the list and seeing, it's fascinating. You find that a lot of the tzaddikim, particularly, it ends up being a lot of the Rosh Yeshivas ended up having businesses. You have Rav Huna, and you have Rav Chizda, and you have over here, different Chachamim, and it seemed that there was a mahalach of business. There was a mahalach of business. And the mahalach of business, I think, what you just mentioned before, obviously today we have the ability because of the internet that a person is able to work in a way where he is able to manage things without putting a minimal amount of time. But there was this mahalach that we find a lot, that Chachamim had businesses where they had people working under them. They were able to manage, they were able to manifest wealth in a tremendous way and be able to be tremendous balei tzedakah and being mefarnes the yeshivas and being mefarnes communal needs in a tremendous way. But they managed to do that by being in business. And then at the same time, like you said, we find story after story, and it's interesting because the jobs that we find that the Tanaim Amoraim were doing, we would never think of doing today. Like that's considered to be
a busha.
It's dirty work, to be a tanner, to be a cobbler, to be a schlepper, to be a schlepper. They used to schlep, to be a builder. These are jobs, no Jewish mother would be too excited to have their son doing it.
It was good enough. It was good enough for them, but it's not good enough for us.
Right. It's an interesting.
Maybe there's an emes to that today.
But we spoke about it once in Pnimius, that in terms we find different aspects of work, more with our bodies, more with our minds as we travel through time. But it's an amazing thing that we find that two mahalchim, we find the mahalach of working less, and therefore for those people, like you said, based off of their personality, that it's good for them to be able to get in business, and not everyone has that, and that sometimes I was just having a conversation with someone today, and he was trying to figure out, what he's going to be doing. And there's a certain aspect of a personality, we call it in one of the models, the enterprising, and we've discussed a lot. Somebody that likes to be in charge, somebody that gets a chiyus, he gets vitality from managing projects, being in charge of people, persuading people, highly competitive. Like, this is a certain type of an energy, to be involved in business, works well. And then you have other people that That's not their thing. And at the end of the day, like as the Chovos Levavos speaks about, and others as well, that when a person understands like where his kochos are and where his talents are and where his strengths are, how Hashem made him, for him, he's going to be an employee. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, a person could say, hey, I'm going to spend 7-8 hours of my day working. What does that say about me? Where's my potential to be able to become, a tzaddik? Where's that potential for me to be able to become a Talmid Chacham? And then we have these very validating stories of great people that worked a full day of work and they became great. Where do we find it? We spoke about the Tanaim and Amoraim, but I guess traveling a little bit more into history. I know in the Rishonim, we have Rashi, Rabbeinu Tam. Rabbeinu Tam was the businessman. Tam,
and they worked hard.
They worked. But I'm saying also in terms of
even in our Dor, I'll just tell you, what comes to mind is Rav Ashlag, the Balasulam. You heard of the Balasulam?
Yeah.
Rav Ashlag. 24 chalakim on the Zohar. So the Masorah that I understand from Rav Ashlag that I heard from his grandson is that Rav Ashlag was in London, and he was a labourer, a bricklayer, he was a labourer, and he was so poor he had like scraps of paper, and he wrote the Sulam on scraps and paper. And the grandson told me, and as well, there's somebody in London, when Rabbi Baruch Ashlag would stay in London, he would stay by his house, and he told me that Rabbi Baruch said if my father had 200 more scraps of paper, he would have written 200 more commentaries on the Balasulam. So he was a labourer. Now, I've done labouring, I've done building, I learned building, I do bricklaying, I've got nice pictures of my brickwork and my, Quetta bond, my English bond. I love bricklaying and working with my hands. And when you've done a hard day's labour, it's very difficult to come home and start to learn. It's not poshet. And I just think, like Rav Ashlag, where was he? He worked a full day. And he didn't earn much from his full day, but I guess he felt that that's what he needed to be doing. Maybe Alpi Pnimius and Inyan of Bittel, whatever it may be. And he wrote the Balasulam. Go to another individual, our family Rebbe, the Biala Rebbe Shlita. So the Biala Rebbe is a businessman. He got a Yerusha and he invested it wisely in pretty much property. Nachon? It was property. And he managed to amass a comfortable amount of money to allow him to sit and learn. And I think my brother was there one time when he got a fax of properties, and he'd look over his properties, make sure everything's okay, and I'm sure he had a manager, everything's okay, and then went back to speaking to my brother. Nachon, that's he's a mamash. So we have the Sas Rebbe who as well worked. I'll tell you by the Pilzno Rav. Imagine this. Two stories. Pilzno Rav, the Biana Rebbe, and Reb Moshe Feinstein. When they came in from wherever they came from, there was a takufa, there was a period of time where they made, I think it was like the metal dustbins. They sat together and they made the metal dustbins.
Wow.
And they sat together. Can you imagine that? Or for example, the stories, Rabbi Singer told me the story.
Wow.
Or for example, they did diamonds, and he was together with a few other very choshev rabbonim. They're cleaning diamonds. It's like people worked. People were Isaac, and they still were Balei Aveda. And I think it's something very important to think about.
Right, because I know for some people, like I know for myself, I've definitely had thoughts of like, if I was set up in a way where I was able to just, had a business and was just able to work for a few hours a day, then afterwards, then I'd be able to, dedicate all this time towards learning, and then I'd really be able to grow in my limud Torah, right? And then sometimes it's just not a mitzias, and there could be some type of feeling of yeush or a feeling of despair of that, okay, that's just not something I can do. But then you have stories of people that worked and still were able to become great.
One has to know themselves. You have to know yourself. You have to understand yourself. You have to know how you work. You have to use your time properly. I want to tell you, do you remember the story about the Kollel in the beginning of the war? 1940s, 50s?
Yeah.
So there's a Yid who, he's a businessman, lives in, I think, Germany. He's a businessman. And what happened from Eretz Yisrael when they were starting the Kolelim? So he comes and he's collecting. So he comes to this Yaka, this Balabait who has a business, and he says, we're collecting for Limudei Torah. What's this? A kollel. And what do you do in the kollel? Like, what's going on? Oh, well, we learn all day. You learn all day? Gewaldig. Like, how many hours are you learning? We daven Shacharis, and then we're there from 9 o'clock till 1 o'clock. Then we have a 3-hour break. And then from, 3 o'clock till 6 o'clock. And then have a break. And then, a couple of more hours afterwards. And the Yid thinking to himself, that's what you do? So how many hours is it? It's like 9 o'clock till 1 o'clock. So he thinks to himself, he's up at 5 o'clock in the morning, 4:30. The businessman is up at 4 o'clock in the morning, gets ready, goes to the base of Medrash, and he learns for a few hours. Then he goes to work, has a lunch break and learns. And then after he comes home with his family, and then he goes out and learns. And he says, he counts on his fingers, the amount of time that you're working full day learning, I'm learning the same amount. I'm learning the same amount. And I see, that's like he's up. I think people can get up early and people can organize their time properly. But I also appreciate people are very overwhelmed today.
Yeah,
people are very overwhelmed emotionally. People are overwhelmed in many areas of life. However, I'll give an example. We have a friend in our Chabura. And he does Tanakh, Mishnah, which he finishes every year, and he does Daf Yomi Bavli, and he does Daf Yomi Yerushalmi, and he works the full day. That's Choshev. He's already made a Siyam on Bavli twice. He's done a Siyam on Bavli, I think, and now he's learning Yerushalmi as well. And I just find that it's so easy to become distracted. It's so easy to be involved in something and then bang, the time has gone. And we have to be essentialists. What's important to me, and to live what is important to me. Now, I'll just add another nakuda. We're looking at it very clinically. Limit HaTorah, and Avodas Hashem, and whatever it is. It could be that when a person becomes more mature in Avodas Hashem, a person can understand that actually my chelek is have a friend of mine, lives in Yerushalayim. You know what he does? He goes out and he hangs around Chabadniks and he helps put tefillin on people. He's not the best learner. And he says to himself, he does his normal learning after Shacharis for an hour, and then he feels as part of his Avodas Hashem after speaking to his Rabbonim, to make use of his time to give back to Am Yisrael. He's not a Chabadnik.
That's what he does.
But that's what he does. So I don't want to fall into the trap of very clinical, limit HaTorah, mitzvahs, As a human being who is born into this beautiful nation, Am Yisrael, who has chiyuvim of Torah, Avodah Gimulus Chasadim, you have to find, through hopefully the guidance of your Rabbonim, you have to find what is important to me. Balance. What does balance mean to me? How does balance open up to me? And you have to take a pencil and paper and you have to write down what actually is a balanced life, what's important. And it could also be that, for example, as long as you meet your chiyuvim of Torah, maybe you will excel in chesed. Maybe you will become a godel b'Torah in chesed. Maybe you'll become a godel haTorah in tefillah. Maybe you'll be a godel haTorah, which is not any less of being a husband and a father. You have to find where you fit, and you have to make sure you live the life that you live, and not to undercut yourself. To be fully engaged, fully alive with everything that you do.
Right. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, because, for sure, sometimes, while it could be inspirational hearing about stories of people that wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning and they're, able to learn more than the guy who's sitting in kollel. Some people with us may be thinking, okay, well, I'm not doing that, so then what does that mean about me? And I think the real walkaway over here is that we need to be real with ourselves and recognize that Avodas Hashem is comprehensive.
Yes.
And it needs to become integrated.
Yeah.
And we have the part of our life which is our work, which we here have had discussions and we understand that that's also part of Avodas Hashem. But at the same time, we also have the aspect of Gemilas Chasadim, we have the aspect of Torah, we have the aspect of Tefillah. And what we need to do in order to make sure that we're not going off track on one of them, and that's really where we started off this conversation here about how to make sure we don't end up working too much, is that first and foremost, be aware of what are our priorities, what are those things that are important to us, and then to be checking in and see, is there something which is falling by the wayside too much? Because something that we've discussed, and of course that we're going to be bringing out about work-life balance, if that's really something which is realistic. We've had conversations.
Work-life rhythm.
Is there such a thing, work-life balance? It's a big buzzword today, but we don't really believe it exists. But in any event, one of the things that we speak about is the fact that life is always changing. I know, Rabbi Gerzi, you're always speaking about this, that we're always oscillating and life is always changing. And at the most we can do in any conversation, as we're doing here today, is we're freeze framing. We're talking about specific points, but we have to understand is that at certain stages of life, things are going to change. And it could be that for myself or for you at a certain point of your life, working X amount of hours is amazing and it's gewaldic.
Correct.
And then something could shift and something could change. And then the question is that, are we able to adapt to that change, or are we finding, and this is are we finding that there's something in our lives that's becoming neglected for a long period of time? Because sometimes it could be we need to put something on the side for a month, for 3 months. It could be that right now I need to focus on my degree. Right now I need to focus on getting that promotion. Or right now I need to focus on
exercise.
On exercise.
Can I chime in for a moment?
If it's about exercise, for sure.
Oh, gewaldig. I in London, and I Baruch Hashem, I was zeicha because of my background in health. I'm a physical therapist, nutrition advisor. I tell you, mamash, unbelievable. I don't want to say the names because I don't know if they'll want me to say the names. I was zeicha to work with Gedolei Torah in exercise. And it's an amazing reality because one person, Rav Avadia, so I remember once he said, it surprised him. He always knew the chashivas of it, but doing some exercise for hours and hours and hours, he was so much clearer. I don't know how Rav Avadia becomes even more clearer, but he was so much clearer. In London, the Rada Mishel Rebbe, Reb Chuna Halpin, so it's, again, another person, like, Tachlis is that he said, Rabbanu Shalom, whoa, look at that, 5 minutes of exercise equated to another, he was, doing daf yomi and up very early, and his ruchnius was deeply affected by a few minutes of mobilization and exercise. And yes, things are constantly oscillating. And yes, in life, sometimes we have to put a dagesh over here, we have to be more focused here or more focused there. And it's important to be conscious. But lemashal, this rhythm of life and recognizing what's important, sometimes you can do something small and it could impact so many other areas of your life without you even realizing. So how many times I've said to people who are seriously engaged at work and they're honest at work, they're not on their phones and distracted, but they get tired. So what do you do when you get tired? So number one, we've spoken about this before, not in this forum, but the Heilige Ropshitz are right. Says days Hashem. So you have Heilige ups and downs throughout the day. You have ups and downs. So when you've got an up, leverage it. But what happens when you're exhausted? And it's an amazing thing. First of all, there was one particular yid and he couldn't keep his eyes open. I told him to speak to his boss and his boss was very understanding. But you know what we said? We put in a few things. Take 5 minutes, drink. Make sure you're properly hydrated. Okay? Take 10 minutes, do some push-ups, stomach crunches, squats. And it's an amazing thing how, it made a massive shift in his daily rhythm. But it just comes to show you, when we're speaking about Avodas HaKodesh, when we're speaking about Avodas Hashem, integration, where am I? Who am I? What's important for now? Look at the models that are out there. Be sensible, be real, and live good.
Wow. Yeah, thank you for adding that aspect of exercise, because I think if we, sum up what we've been talking about here today in terms of this question, how we could avoid overworking, we're seeing that there's different layers of it. Meaning there's the layer of actually making an external change, which is saying, hey, maybe actually, I've been working 9 to 5 my whole entire life, or 9 to 6, and maybe I have the opportunity now, to see what my skill set is. Maybe I've developed an expertise. Maybe I can now develop my own business. maybe there's an opportunity for me to be able to pick up another skill that would enable me to be able to scale myself, use my time better, and therefore be able to open up more time for our learning, for our family. That's more of an external change. We're thinking maybe I'm in a field right now where it's becoming very demanding. I should consider shifting to a different job, shifting to a different field, which is using a parallel skill set. That's what we'd call an external change if a person is finding themselves overworking. But then I think, which is a lot more of a subtle point, what we've been speaking about on a couple of levels, this is really where the exercise piece comes in, is that sometimes it's an internal change. And that internal change sometimes is really just this belief that we may actually have subscribed to. I know I've subscribed to it, which is you put in more time, you're going to get more, right? If I spend more time at work, I spend more time in my business, that's going to make me more productive. It's going to bring in more money. And what we started off with, we saw that's actually being challenged today globally. And the Torah understood that, is that not necessarily is putting in more time mean you're going to have more. And sometimes we need to just make that internal change into our belief system, because that's going to open us up to actually changing this pattern of just finding ourselves being late at night on the computer. So that's one level of an internal change. And then this other aspect of the internal change is recognizing, what aspects of my life right now somehow have become neglected. And I just need to take accountability for that. Recognize right now my kids need more attention. Right now my spouse needs more attention. My Torah has been running on low. Now I need a shift and try to be able to give in an injection. And sometimes you can have these little mini injections like exercise or these little interventions, which somehow could just open up our total productivity so that we're not necessarily feeling that burnout. So if you're in a job where, right now you're in a situation you feel like at the end of the day I come home and I'm exhausted and I feel like I am overworking, and therefore I'm not going to be able to put in those few hours in the base medrash, something like exercise, something like drinking, something like breathing, just recognizing the tools that we have could just enable us to be able to feel that much more invigorated. So there's really a solution, I'd say, for everyone, depending on whatever situation you're in, but to understand that the Torah was sensitive to this, and that ultimately Hashem wants us, and to give a bracha to each of us. We should be able to live integrated lives, balanced lives, and lives in which we're able to feel a sense of energy and vitality in everything that we do.
Amen. Amen. Thank you.